What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater. And before we jump in, make sure to like the video down below, leave a comment, and as always, subscribe on YouTube down below to be informed of upcoming videos and live streams. Ring that bell. Now let's jump into today's topic, props in improv. Today's video is in response to a question I got in a comment for one of my videos. So yeah, leave comments because I love doing videos based on those comments. And this is gonna be in regards to using props in improv. Because when you learn improv, you're generally learning the art of pantomime, and there's really no props on stage aside from a couple chairs. So how do I feel about utilizing props in improvised scenes? And is there an effective way to use them? So when it comes to using props in improvised scenes, it really just depends. I've seen it done really successfully, and I've seen it done in a way that kind of takes away from the scene. When you're beginners, you learn pantomime to create an environment because, your teachers want to get you comfortable and confident creating weight in thin air and establishing an environment that you get to play with. And I always, as a teacher, kind of discourage initially, like not reaching into your actual pockets to grab something. Like if it's a scene based around a transaction at a grocery store, pulling out your wallet and handing over real cash might clash a little bit with what you've been creating. In the scene, you've been using like a mime shopping cart and there's a mime cash register. So I always, enforce, don't worry about actually reaching into something that's already been created. Use your imagination to create something that's not actually there. Now here's the thing, this little thing called the pandemic happened, and it changed everything, especially when it came to improv, because now instead of improvising on stage, we were improvising on Zoom in our own little separate environments. And there was an element of being disconnected, so I tried as hard as I could to make people feel not just connected to each other, but just connected as well to their spaces. So I was more lenient. I still taught pantomime and object work, but I also told people like, hey, if you're in a scene and there's a reference to like drinking coffee and you have a mug next to you, go ahead and grab it. You have real weight in your hand and it might help you feel more connected to the scene. Or if somebody starts a scene by saying, all right, I got a big announcement, everybody take notes. Well, hey, if you got a notebook in your space, pick it up and start, jotting down notes. Again, it might help you feel more connected to the scene. So when it comes to improvising on Zoom, go for it. If you have props or just objects in your space, as long as you can easily access them and, not have to like take yourself out of the scene to go panic and look for like some type of a tie in your room, then go for it. If you can make like a box of stuff like costumes or just quick little things that you can grab, that is preferable so that you don't have to go on a scavenger hunt looking for something that might be needed in a scene. Now, when it comes to using props on the actual stage, not on Zoom, there are, again, pros and cons to it. A big pro about props and costumes is it helps you feel more connected to the character sometimes, right? If you put on a lab coat, you feel smarter. If you put on, glasses, you feel smarter. If you're holding a sword and feeling that weight, you feel stronger, tougher, more badass, right? Just like in movies, they have props not just because, it helps it like look more like a movie, but it does help the actors portray the characters stronger and make them feel more like the characters. There are going to be cons to using props in improv. Obviously, the big one is you can't get every single prop in the world. It's very expensive and you're gonna run out of room backstage in your storage, right? If there's a scene set in a grocery store and you have a cash register backstage? And even if you do, like the speed at which you would need to run backstage, grab it, take it out onto the stage, and get a table to put it on, it's just too much. It would be a headache. And, not everything needs a prop. You don't need a steering wheel on stage to show that. And if you decided to do that and have like a bunch of these props, the problem is there could be a bit of a clash sometimes, right? Half of the cast doesn't use props at all, and half of the other cast always uses props. It can look a little bit disconnected and almost look like two battling gangs on stage, even though we're improvising. We're trying to create something together. My recommendation when it comes to props is try it out. If you're running a rehearsal with your team, do a prop night, bring in some, common objects like a cane, a wig, a beard, a tie, a clipboard, a cup of coffee that's probably empty though, and just like see if these kind of help scenes and help them make them feel more connected and just visually appealing. There's cons and there's pros to it. Afterwards, talk about it, or which objects were easier to use over some other objects that may have been harder to use. We might talk about, was our attention span kind of split from what was happening on stage if we were looking for a prop? Just have a conversation about it because, I have used props before in a really effective way. Pretty recently, there was a show where I was playing a character that was kind of aging forward really fast. And I was like, well, you know, I can put this into my body, but I can also put it into the way I look. I have a wig backstage. I have a beard. I have a cane. So I came out at some point looking like this.
You won't look so stupid. Oh my God. He's even older.
So as you can see, props can be really fun to use, not just as performers, but also for the audience to watch. They get to see like a little extra layer of visual representation in your shows. And, you know, they see it so they can instantly start buying into it. But the thing is, though, again, as I said, props should never feel like a crutch. You know, if they are something you're relying on in your shows, like, oh, I'll get a prop, it'll give me a big laugh, because that's what Carrot Top does, right? We don't want to rely on them, okay? Think of props as like a cherry on top of your milkshake. Some people love the cherry, you know, and they think of it as, oh, one last little extra taste, mwah, before I've finished my dessert, right? Other people may be like, I don't really like cherries, but that looks nice, you know? It's an aesthetic thing. So think of it as just a little extra spice you put in your shows, and it's never gonna be the dominating flavor of what you are doing on stage. And hey, before we conclude today, I wanna give you a game that you can do with your team using props, okay? This is actually a game you can play in your shows. It's a game that's commonly on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Itsy bitsy spider my ass! Ah! Chip, 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 chip.
We're gonna do it in a little bit of a different way though, where one person is gonna bring a box of just random stuff that all of the other performers have not seen. Another way you can do it is each person, like if you have a group of 6, each of those people in that group of 6 brings maybe like 2 or 3 objects, and anytime one of their objects is being used, they're not actively participating. They're kind of being the host at that moment. But they're gonna essentially bring out a random object, you know, say for example, it's like this. It's just a bottle of water, right? And we're gonna try to use this object in a way that it is not normally used. So for example, we're not gonna treat this as a bottle of water. We're going to interpret its shape, the way it looks, and draw a parallel to other things and attribute a line of dialogue to it. For example, if it's a pair of scissors, well, I don't know, Bobby, what would you do?
I'm just showing you my orange nads.
Oh, Bobby. When that first object is brought out, you want to immediately be inspired, okay? Look at the way it looks and draw a parallel to something else that might look the same way. So for example, this cell phone. It doesn't just have to mean all of our interpretations just looks like this, right? It just looks like a black rectangle, right? But you can also change it, like just change it like this. You've changed the axes so now it looks different to the audience and to you. So you can find new inspiration. In addition to that, let's just look at this object, okay? This is like a little emergency lantern that we had at our box office. So, you know, look at the way it looks, you know? Also, it has a handle too. So maybe you think of it as like a picnic basket. So you can treat it like your Little Red Riding Hood going to see grandma, you know? But it can also possibly be manipulated. So this object opens up, you know? This is what it can emit light this way, right? So, wow, I look at it now and I got more inspiration. It looks like a big ass cell phone from the 80s, right? So you would hold it and use it in such a way and attribute a line to it. Ideally something specific that's not just like, I'm using a big cell phone, you know? No, maybe you say like, hey Jared, you wanna go check out the Goonies this afternoon? It's like, okay, that was more specific and it made me think, oh, I referenced an 80s movie because I'm using an 80s style cell phone. This game is just a fun little way to just utilize props in a way where you don't have to let it overtake your show. And it also allows you to start interpreting and using your imagination and drawing parallels, all great things that are used on the improvised stage. So try out the game of props next time at your rehearsal, and hey, maybe try using some props sometimes and see what fun lies ahead. And that concludes this episode of MUT Tips, everybody. Thank you so much for checking it out. I really appreciate it. Again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye!